Hi, and welcome to The Bright Balloon, a podcast where I'm sharing bright ideas for your balloon business. My name is Sarah Meyer, and I'm a balloon business owner like you, and I love the creative side of what I do, but I really love the business side, which seems to be the part where most people struggle. So I'm here to help. Each week, I'm bringing you an episode full of bite-sized tips you can use to make improvements in your business. I want you to make more money, eliminate stress, and learn along with me as we grow our creative businesses together. Welcome to The Bright Balloon, presented by 17 Hats. Hello and welcome to this episode of The Bright Balloon podcast. I am so excited because I am interviewing my friend Stephen Jones, who is the executive director of Float, which is a balloon convention that frankly changed my life. It is very near and dear to my heart. So it's very exciting that we are going to chat about what it takes to plan an event on this scale, but I'm also very excited to announce that I am giving away a registration to Float. I'm so excited to be able to do this. I have attended Float 4 times now, I believe, and each time it has been so valuable for my business. So I'm so excited to be able to gift that to one listener. So in order to enter, you just have to be a subscriber on the Bright Balloon email list. So if you already receive our weekly newsletters, you are already entered. If you do not receive those newsletters, just click the link in the show notes and you can just sign up with your email address. And I will be pulling a winner on June 19th. So you have about a month to enter. Now, if you've already purchased your Float ticket and you are the lucky winner, we will reimburse, actually Float will generously reimburse what you've already paid, and then I will be able to give you that scholarship or that award. So I'm really excited to be in a position to be able to do this for the first time ever, and a lot of my success in balloons is because of attending this convention. So I'm very excited to be able to give that to one lucky listener. I hope as many of you as possible enter, and I can't wait to see who wins. Now, this interview is really great with Stephen. Not only is he the executive director of Float, but he also runs a balloon business full time. So he is the owner of Balloon Designers, which is out in Seattle, Washington, in that area. So he is juggling a lot of things, and I love how honest he is in this interview about the realities of that, why that's tricky, why he needs a big staff of people on the Float committee. He has changed how the classes are selected and talks about some of the upcoming instructors and how they were chosen. It's a good conversation. But settle in because it's a long conversation. We chat for about an hour. So if you are not familiar with Float, this is going to be a good introduction. And I think if you are familiar with Float, this will be fun to get the scoop behind the scenes a little bit. So thank you so much to Stephen for taking time to chat. And just a reminder, make sure that you are on the Bright Balloon email list so that you could potentially get your registration paid for Float 2024. With that, let's hear from one of our sponsors and then get into the interview with Stephen Jones. Thank you to our show sponsor, Balloon Suite, for not only sponsoring this podcast, but for taking over thebrightballoon.com. So if you are curious what a Balloon Suite website looks like, head over to my website at thebrightballoon.com and see for yourself. They took over my website about a month ago, and it was pretty much no work on my end, which I absolutely appreciate. So if now is the time that you need to either level up your website or finally get a website, check out Balloon Suite in the show notes and tell them that the Bright Balloon sent you. All right, welcome to this episode. The one, the only, Stephen Jones is on the show. Stephen, holy cow, you're a big get. I'm excited to chat with you.
I don't I don't necessarily buy into that methodology, but that's fine.
You are so well versed in balloons. I mean, you're incredibly talented, but I'm interested to chat with you because you have worn so many hats, and you still do. You run a business, you run Float, and all that goes into this ginormous convention. You've been in balloons 27 years, almost 28. You've kind of seen it all. You've seen, I would imagine 9/11 was a huge time to be in business. Then
It was a challenge.
COVID, like you've been through a lot as a business owner, so I'm very excited to hear your story. So why don't we start with that? Just give us a brief introduction in case someone lives under a rock and doesn't know who you are.
Oh, there's a lot of people that don't know who I am, so that's okay. I mean, especially with this, well, I mean, let's face it, we've had a massive influx of new people.
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit arrogant for anybody to think, oh, you don't know who I am, because that, I mean, this industry has such turnover. It's that kind of a thing. So I can never assume that people know who anybody is. No, I did start. I want to say it was back. I was, if I'm not mistaken, it was back in 1997. My first ex-wife, as I'm always on the lookout for the next ex missing wife. Um, my but we went to a Start Your Own Business Expo, and they had the stuffing machine. That was when the stuffing machines were first really becoming very popular, mostly for gift giving.
Okay.
And so we were exposed to the world of balloons there. We decided to invest in the machine. Very quickly discovered that they were also out to sell it to anybody who would buy one. And of course, the moment grocery stores and party stores and everything started buying one, suddenly I started collecting a lot of dust. But we discovered the wonderful world of balloon decorating and balloon building and sculpting and the whole nine yards. And we went to a convention, and my life was forever changed.
Interesting. So did you stick with the stuffing for a while or did you quickly figure out decor? I mean, you're a crazy good twister too. How did you
I think I think we used that machine about 5 or 6 times.
Oh,
That was about it. But and when we got this initial thing, my she bought a couple bags of twisting balloons. Just, oh, what can we do with these? And so yeah, I started as a twister.
okay.
Started like our again. You have to remember, this is before social media. This is before there was Wi-Fi. This was when it was all still dial-up internet connection. Our business was based on a weekly um, swap meet. Like we literally had like a booth at a thing called Traders World, which was in the Cincinnati, Ohio area, and every it was every weekend, like Saturdays
Okay.
and Sundays. And so to keep myself from getting bored, I would twist animals for kids, and then so that started into there. Then the more and more exposed I became to the balloon world, the more and more I realized I could do. And then eventually, of course, we ended up going our separate ways. And I
Yeah.
wanted very much to stay in the balloon world. And so I did.
Who were some of those early connections? Like, do you remember some of your earliest friends in the balloon world? Maybe people who are still around and
Oh,
still working?
many of them are. Many of my first friends are still very much in the balloon world. Patty Sorrell was one of my very first instructors. Troy April, the god of balloons from St. Louis. The Many of the people on my float staff, Bonnie and Sandy, Bonnie Fisher and Sandy Presley
Yeah.
were volunteers on one of my builds at one of my sculpture competitions, and we've been friends ever since. Um, yeah, so I'm very happy that many of the people that I am friends with today. Carl Woody, another great example, was one of the first Balloon Town people, which eventually evolved into Float. Carl's one of my dearest friends, and I've known him forever. And then, of course, now that is one of the things, though. A lot of the gurus that were around then quietly fade out, right?
Hmm.
And so that is a trend that I'm seeing a lot in the industry, is that some of the more established people, there's a cycle, you know, and as you get to a certain point, most of them just tend to quietly disappear. Hey, whatever happened to blah blah blah?
Hmm.
Um, if you're not directly friends with them, it's hard to find that out sometimes. But yeah,
Interesting. Well, you just mentioned Balloon Town.
yeah.
I've heard I've heard like murmurings of Balloon Town. What was that?
So Balloon Town, in today's comparison, Balloon Town was essentially what the big balloon build is now.
Okay.
It was a very similar project. It was from 2004 to 2007. It was conceived as a walk-through balloon experience. But of course, the very first one in 2004, it was like me and like three or four other people, including my parents.
Okay.
It's still used. I mean, it was still 30 or 40,000 balloons that I personally paid for. But we developed a corporate sponsorship in 2005. We picked up Metallic as a sponsor for it after I won Designer of the Year at Burton and Burton's event. And then so it dramatically grew at that point, right? So now that
Hmm.
we had, unlimited product. Um, the final event was in 2020. I keep saying 2020. No, 2007. I got to go back to my old days. Um, and yeah, we had about 75 people there. We had, and again, all of these events were, there was a central story that was developed and written by myself, and then we built the story. So people,
Interesting.
so people would walk through it. Now, it wasn't nearly as polished and formal as the big balloon build is now, because there was a lot of, there was a central design, there was a central floor plan, there was a central this and that, and then the people that came were encouraged to throw in their own creativity as well. Like there was, okay, we need a tractor, right? And so X amount of people, oh well, let's build a tractor. And so,
Yeah.
like I said, it didn't have the same clean and polished, consistent look that the big balloon build does now, because there's not a central design element that's going on. But people felt a real personal connection to it. Plus, on top of that, it was free. People just
Okay.
people just came. In fact, we actually even we put them up in hotels and we fed them while they were here. Uh,
Interesting. Was it a charitable? Was it a fundraiser?
yeah, it was a fundraiser, but we never attracted the, because I was wearing so many hats, right? Because I was doing the design work and because I was doing the coordination because of everything else. My mistake was I reached out to the groups and said, oh, okay, like here's what we're doing for you, and we expected them to do the marketing,
Yeah.
and that
Right.
didn't happen. In many ways, it did not occur. And so they were like, "Oh, great, thanks. Where's our check?" Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No, having just done the balloon build here, it was so much work. I mean, as the host, it was so
"Mhm,
much work. I mean, just the food was hard. Just coordinating catering was difficult.
yeah,
And then the promotion and then kind of even just explaining to people what it even is was hard. So I don't know how you did all of that year after year.
well, it eventually it didn't, right?
Mm,
Eventually, what happened was we were getting more and more calls from people that were like, "Hey, what classes are you teaching at Balloontown?" And we're like, "It's not classes; it's like learn by doing."
sure.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. And eventually it was like, wow, we're getting a lot more interest in people wanting classes versus this concept. Maybe we're going about it, not that we're going about it wrong, but maybe we should go about it differently.
Sure. Time to evolve. Yeah.
That's
So
where
when about was that?
that was 2000. It was right around 2007. That was the last Balloon Town. And that's when we decided, we went to Metallic, who of course was still our sponsor at the time, and said, hey, if we considered flipping this into a convention concept, is this something you would support? Because there were also other factors that were going on at the time. There were, leading up to 2007, there were three balloon conventions for decorators. There were a plethora of Twister related
Hmm.
events, but as far as decor goes, there were three. Two of them were either dying out or being shifted to like an every 5 year concept,
Okay.
and the only one that was left was run by an individual that a lot of people had very low opinions of, myself
Okay.
included. He was just, he was not the kind of person we wanted representing the industry. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, well, we can sit around and complain about it, or we can actually do something.
Yeah.
And so we decided at that point, I'm gonna, if I can't say all this if I'm not willing to stand up and do it.
Yeah.
So I put my money down and I said, okay, here we go. And that's and of course, float. Um, the name was specifically chosen because we wanted a term that related to balloons, but was completely separate for the decor world.
Sure.
And like, because twisting, it was, I mean, it's not, there was always going to be some non-round element, but it wasn't twister focused. It was very much decorator focused, which for those of your listeners who are newer to the industry, 15, 20 years ago, there was a huge separation between the twisting world and the decor world, which is blended a lot because of economic reasons from 2008 to now. Um, because when the stock market crashed in 2008, that was the second financial crash
Mm.
our business went through. Um, Suddenly, it was amazing how many twisters suddenly wanted to learn how to make arches,
Yeah.
and because at the time, arch was a 4 letter word
Hmm.
in the twisting world. It was one of those things. It's like you don't, no, no, that's a dirty word. You don't say that.
That's so
Um,
funny. I even saw a difference from my first float to my second float. I remember this huge twisting jam happening in the lobby in St. Louis, and like it felt very different, like in a good way. There were a lot of twisters there learning decor that just 2 years earlier weren't there. So
it
I
worked out.
even saw that shift.
Again, it's amazing that how financial situations equalize things.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you look at COVID, right? You look at the twisting world pre-COVID, and now how many of them have shifted to decor?
Right.
Because the reality is, and again, to no one's fault. When a global pandemic hits and everybody can't work, the twisting world did. I mean, they're still recovering.
Mm-hmm.
The idea. I mean, the because there's certain, like, for example, the Midwest and everything recovered, and the East Coast seems to have recovered much faster. I'm on the West Coast. We just now really came out of COVID, like
Wow.
the mentalities of, I mean, I mean, we just now don't have to wear masks at hospitals, and our last company stopped requiring us to show proof of vaccination.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, no, I do remember that because you're in Seattle now,
I am
right? You're
correct. Yeah.
so because I even remember that. I mean, the Midwest, I would say we were like medium in Wisconsin. Like we bounced back a little bit quicker. I don't know if we bounced back, but people just stopped wearing masks.
Mhm.
And I was never really like shut down. Like I did the outdoor, the yard decor stuff, but then there were a lot of people where their circumstances were not up to them. Like you couldn't go and be a face painter. You couldn't go and be a twister. You couldn't even, like you said, walk into a corporation. And you have some really, really big corporate clients. So losing those jobs, I would imagine, was scary.
Yeah, and we still haven't. Some of them haven't rebounded yet.
Hmm.
Uh, Microsoft, for example, right around the time when they were starting to come back, that's when inflation raged, right?
Yeah.
And they started laying off 50, 60,000 people. And, we get an email that's like, just so we can't justify spending this kind of money when we're laying people off. And I'm like, well,
Right.
of course you can. Now, of course, what we're legitimately worried about is their end of the year is the end of June, their financial end of the year. So
Right.
what we're afraid of is that we're going to get these calls like mid-June in the middle of graduation season and Pride Month. We're waiting to get these phone calls from Microsoft. Oh God, we have to spend these budgets in the next 2 weeks.
Right. Right.
And so we're kind of as braced for that as we can be, because
Yeah.
they can sit here all day long and say, oh, we can't spend, we can't spend, we can't spend, but they also know if they don't spend it by the end of their financial year, they'll lose it.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's going to happen.
Oh, interesting. Well, and okay, so you're talking about your business, you're talking about we. I don't know that we've actually mentioned the name of your business is Balloon Designers.
Correct.
Who is there? What is the scale? I'm looking at a video of you, but listeners obviously can't see the mountains of balloons behind you. What's kind of the setup of your business?
Well, it's basically myself and my partner. For the purposes of everyone's at home smart technology, her name is A to the L to the EXA Rivera. Um, I've had to learn I have to do that, or else I activate people's devices. Which is really funny because we actually did the launch, Amazon's launch of that product.
Oh, okay.
And it was so funny because we're walking around and she's like, "Why does everyone's shirt have my name on it?" And it was, and so, and of course they chose that name because it's not one commonly used.
Yeah,
And so it was just ironic that the balloon person there is named the name of the smart deck.
that is funny. So it's just you two?
95% of the time, yeah,
Wow. Okay.
two of us. Obviously, for larger installs and larger events like that, we do have to bring in other people. But the reality is that, yeah, it's just two extremely hardworking people that put in very long hours and are very, would we like more help? Sure. State of Washington produces a tremendous amount of challenges. For example, we are in a market that has parts of the city, minimum wage is 20 something dollars an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you have Amazon fulfillment centers that are taking in people at the door without an interview, starting them at 30.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so, we've had interviews with people and they're like, well, that's not a living wage. And you're like, well, I don't know what to tell you. This isn't a living wage job.
Yeah, right.
And or the infamous, well, Amazon is starting people at 30. I said, well, then you should go apply at Amazon.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to work for Amazon. Well, there you go. I don't know what more to tell you. But they, it's that mentality that in many regards, it's this whole concept of you're an evil business and therefore you should take care of me for the rest of my life. And there's a balance point. I get it. There's a minimum. And we are absolutely actively, looking for a third person here.
Mm.
Um, so we'll have some.
Do you need help with, in case anyone's listening, do you need help with hands-on stuff, or are you looking more for like an admin?
No, hands on more than likely. My adult niece does assist me at times with that kind of a thing when
Okay.
we need admin assistance. But yeah, I mean, we're going to be announcing soon, and looking to possibly relocate somebody and the whole 9 yards.
Oh, wow, amazing. Well, okay, so my question, my burning question that I've always had is, why are you still running your balloon business? You have to be able to make a living wage from float.
No, absolutely,
No?
no, absolutely not. Everybody thinks that the perception,
Interesting.
but no, it's not there. It's This year's operating budget for float is over $350,000.
Oh my gosh.
And then if you look at the between teacher salaries, between staff salaries, between this is the first year we've actually going to have to hire an outside AV company to handle
Mm,
the events. Um, for those who don't realize, up until this past flow convention, all of the AV is handled by a small two-person team
mhm.
that brought in a couple extra people here and there, but it's just too much. It's overwhelming.
Did the demands increase over COVID? Because I know you went sort of digital, sort like some was online. Did that just boil over?
That was the tipping point for it. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
when you the AV, the group that works with us now, the Beth and Daryl that do our AV now, they're the second group that's come in to do it. And so when your first person's telling you, you know, this is too much, blah blah blah, whatever, then another company comes in and does it. You're like, okay, well maybe. But when the second person tells you that, then you're
Yeah.
okay. Now we have a pattern, and so in this conversation, we realized that maybe what the smartest thing to do would be is to bring them in, the existing folks in, to handle like the day-to-day operational stuff, like the classrooms and that kind of thing, and then hire an outside company to come in to handle the evening functions, because the evening functions are much bigger.
Mm,
So because when you think about the fact that these in-house AV people, or the people that we were using, Beth and Daryl, that we still are using, by the way, I should say, they start their day at 5 in the morning, and then they're ending at 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's not fair to them.
yeah.
And again, my because I have to compartmentalize so many things, it's like, okay, AV, that's Daryl and Beth, let them handle it. And then suddenly you're stopping going, holy crap, they're putting in 20 something hours a day every day. I
Yeah.
wonder why they're cranky all the time. Oh
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
he gets it. So this time around, because of incidents that occurred at the last convention, we now have to have an outside security company come in.
Yeah. Things got rowdy, huh?
At final night, they did, and so as a result, it's a long story, but well, it's not really a long story, but the the jovial, jocular folks that were enjoying themselves, and there wasn't really a location for them to all hang out, so they were hanging out in the lobby of the hotel.
Mhm.
Well, what none of us knew at that time is, because again, we were in the middle of Omicron, right?
Right.
Um, what none of us knew is that the person working the front desk was the only person working in the hotel.
Like
Right. Like
like the only one?
the only person working in the hotel, apparently, from say 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. was that person at the front desk.
Wow.
Right. Which I don't even know if is legal.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And so at one point, she went and told the individuals in the lobby, I really need you to calm down. I need you to be quiet. I need you to this and that. And they thought, You're not going to tell us what to do, which is what, again, I attribute heavily to the we're fed up with COVID and we're going to do what we want type
Yeah.
mentality, which occurred a lot during that era. Um, and unfortunately, it got to a point where she felt the need to call the police.
Hmm.
And now that that has occurred, you can't pretend it can't happen again.
Right.
And so now the hotel is insistent that for the evening events, we have to have security there. And given the fact that our daytime security team has always been volunteer based, and they're always treated really, really poorly, we're hoping that we thought, well, now we're just going to go the full thing. And
Oh, that makes me sad. I think I always have the best time at Float. Like I love it. It's like my learning vacation. I genuinely have so much fun there. So that stinks that people aren't nice to your team.
well, it's one of those things where it's human psyche, right?
Mhm.
You see somebody that you know as another balloon person sitting at the door. So you look at them as, well, they're no better than me. How can they tell me what to do when they're no better than I am? And I always joke that in the past we've always had terrible Tuesdays because Friday, Saturday, Sunday, everybody's super like ridiculously excited to be there. Monday, they're still excited. You've got the first day of classes, you've got the big social party that night. Tuesday, okay, now everybody's been away from their families for a while. They're starting to get a little less sleep, right? People get a little more cranky. And
Yeah.
I always joke that because I get more complaints on Tuesday than any other day.
Huh.
But so you look at that, man, you look at that whole concept of you're no better than me. So now what we're hoping is by bringing in an outside company, people are going to take a different, oh, he said no, that
Yeah.
kind of a thing, right? And so it's, yeah, so we're hoping there'll be a little more respect shown, as it were, in that regard.
Well, I recorded a whole episode about what I like about Float, but I am curious what you like about it, what you think is special about Float.
That's a good question. Because of course I have a very different perspective on it. But what I what has always been FUBU, for us by us.
Hmm.
Float, the most important thing for me, Float has always been autonomous. It has never answered to any one manufacturer, which I think is really important for the success of the event. Because I've always believed that balloons are tools
Hmm.
and you need to know, I mean, for every job, a different tool might be the right thing to use. And I think a lot of people during COVID really learned that lesson,
Right.
right?
Right. It wasn't necessarily preference, it was what you could get.
Right. And then all of a sudden when you're exposed to new tools, you're, hey, this one's pretty damn good, right? Or
Mhm.
whatever. So I've always felt that way about the convention. I think it's really important. And on top of that, Float has always been focused on the intermediate to advanced level artist. And the reason for this is because, you know, my experience at IBAC was a great example, and other conventions. It's IBAC, by the way, was the International Balloon Arts Convention, which was the precursor to the World Balloon Convention,
Okay.
which the fate of which is unknown at this time
Mhm.
because nobody knows what's going to happen with that. Um, but what you would notice is the first time you went, it was, oh my God, this is life changing. The second time you went, you have a really good time. The third time you went, you're like, wait a minute, all these classes are the same thing I took 2 years ago. And,
Sure.
and then it kind of continued. So there were a bunch of us that were like, there really aren't conventions for people that know what they're doing.
Mhm.
And so Float has always been focused on that. Um, and that was one of the things I was the most happy about with COVID. I know this sounds funny, but because we were doing a virtual kind of a thing and because we recorded so many classes, it gave me the opportunity to see the education that was being presented.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned a lot of things.
Interesting. Let's take a quick break. Let's have that be the cliffhanger because I want to hear more about the classes, how you keep it fresh. I think you're kind of an influencer in the sense that you and your committee, you're choosing the classes and the instructors, and I think that that's a hard task. So let's take a quick break and then we will get back into all things Float. All right, the summer crazy months are here, and it feels like I am placing a balloon order every single week, which is great because it means I'm busy. However, the last thing you want to happen is go to place an order and find out that everything you need is out of stock. So, the best option is to head to havinaparty.com so that you can check out not only the stuff you need to order, but some goodies that you might not know that you need to order. They have all of the materials that we need, not only balloons, but materials and supplies so that we can run our balloon businesses efficiently and profitably. So, check out Having a Party Wholesale over at havinaparty.com and tell them that the Bright Balloon sent you. Even better, use the code BRIGHT at checkout for 5% off. All right, welcome back. We left off talking about classes, teachers. You said you were able to kind of virtually be in some of the classes at Last Float. What stood out to you?
The challenge, okay, so again, because I'm wearing so many hats at the convention and I'm running around with my head cut off half the time, which I swear I'm trying not to do in 2024. And I blame my own lack of organization for that situation. um the what I discovered is we had two dramatic issues. The first was, because floats classes are aimed at intermediate to advanced level individuals, we don't discriminate against those who aren't, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anybody can come. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to necessarily be, an experienced person. You could only be in the industry a year or two to come. But what was happening is people would ask questions that were extremely basic.
Mm,
The teachers are supposed to, when that occurs, the teachers are supposed to say, you know what, that's a great question, but I'm going to have to address that after class because I need to keep this content going.
sure.
But because most of the teachers don't want to hurt that person's feelings, they now take 20 minutes of class time to explain what a quad is.
Right.
And so now I have 50 people angry because that instructor has spent all that time. On top of that, there's also some instructors that, I hate to say this, but they bank on that as filler in their
Mm,
classes, right? And that's not what we want at Float. And we saw that in a few of the classes that took place at the convention. And then on top of that, we also saw instructors who pitched content they'd actually never done.
okay.
And so what we found out through watching these classes is, wait a minute, that's not what your notes are. And then it's like, well, yeah, we realized this wasn't going to work. And it's like, oh, so then you really had no idea what you were teaching.
Yeah, yeah.
So we've had to take a, so this was kind of my line in the sand. Okay, this has to stop, because at that point many of the instructors would tell me specifically, well, I'm really only beholden to my sponsor.
Yeah.
And as long as they're happy, that's all I'm really concerned about. Well, that's a
Well,
problem.
and for people who aren't familiar with this model, this teaching world, when you teach at an event, you're usually paid by a balloon manufacturer or a sponsor, someone in the balloon world.
Correct.
And like you're saying, as long as they're happy, that's really all that matters. But you got the short end of that stick because people were, yeah, they weren't answering to you, they were answering to someone that may or may not have even been there in some cases.
And it begins to affect my integrity, right? Because
Mhm.
I'm telling people, no, this is the kind of convention we're running, and they're like, well, that's not what I'm seeing in a classroom. So we took control of that this year. And so we created the advisory board, which
Mhm.
is a panel of about 13 to 15 people who shall remain nameless.
Oh, are they anonymous? I didn't know if it is it
They
a
are not.
secret? Okay,
It is.
because that kind of that puts them in a tricky situation
It,
too, and
yes, it does. Right. Now, I know a few people have shared, there's a few names that are floating around because they've told people or whatever, but most of the people are completely anonymous. And exactly, the intention, because part of the problem is too, like okay, the kind of people, like if I were to handpick my teachers at Float, by nature, I'm a sculptor. Like
yeah.
I do mostly sculpture work. I find myself tapping 15 people that do sculpture work.
Hmm.
That's not the balloon industry, right? That's not reflective of the industry. And that was one of the greatest things about forming this board, this panel, was that now we have a much broader spectrum of people that are choosing who the instructors are. And I'm looking at it going, okay, so there really is a demand for this. There's a demand for that. There's a demand for that. We need to have that. So I'm the essential gatekeeper. And so what would happen is people would submit their application. Or is all the content there? Do you have your proof of professionalism there? One of the things that Float adopted in August of 2021, I believe it was that moving forward, anyone teaching for Float has to be able to prove that they're running a legitimate business. Um, they have to have either a business license, or if their state doesn't or country doesn't require it, then they need to show proof of insurance or whatever it is that's required in their part of the world to be considered a professional. Um, because if we're going to present a professional convention, the people representing the convention need to be conducting themselves in a professional manner.
Right.
This is not to say that there aren't ridiculously talented people out there that are not that they're doing it under the radar. There's some
Yeah.
incredibly talented people out there, but there's a line, and that has to be respected. Um, and at the same time, we don't insist that people have to show that kind of proof to come to Float. I mean, that
Hmm.
because Lord knows, for the first 2 or 3 years of my professional life, I don't know that I was necessarily
Right. Yeah. You just kind of start. Yeah.
got to start and you do it. Um, and then one day it becomes real, and you're like,
Hmm.
oh, I'm supposed to be paying taxes on this. Okay, and
Yeah. Or someone asks for like proof of insurance and you're like, wait, what?
right, exactly. So that's the day you're like, okay, I'm going to either do it or I'm not. Um, and then what happens is, then once those applications come in, then the board reviews them, and then we had three different gauges that they could choose. They could either say green light, yes, without done. Um, they could say no, or they could say yes, but.
Hmm.
And the way it worked out, I thought it was just going to be two. I figured it'd be yes or no, and then I discovered very quickly there's a yes but, and so it has to be by a quorum. So like 2/3 majority has to the individual that's tapped to teach at Float has to be approved by a 2/3 majority. It can't just be a 50-50 or 51-49%. It's got to be an overwhelming yes or no.
Hmm.
And then what happened was a lot of individuals, they're like, we really like these people as teachers, but we're not wild about these class offerings or whatever. So in some cases, those individuals were allowed to resubmit. In other cases, if we had overlap, if there was already one teacher, for example, that was already greenlit by the board, and then these other folks were offering the same content, but they were kind of yes buts, then those individuals were just not this time, but maybe next time.
Sure.
And then what would happen then is once those individuals were approved, then we presented them to sponsors, and the sponsors tapped who they wanted to tap, and everything else. Um, we're probably going to modify that a little bit for the 2026 convention,
Okay.
to where what we'll probably do is we'll allow manufacturers and other sponsors. I mean, you don't have to be a manufacturer to pay for a teacher. But what will probably happen is they'll get to handpick one, and then but they must pick from our board. And
Gotcha.
still, the board will still have to approve the classes of the handpicked people. Uh,
Sure.
and so, but then what's also happening this time around is that the manufacturers, the teacher pay is now spun into their sponsorship. So now Float is actually writing the checks to the
Right. Which puts you ultimately back in control of the. Because there are like benchmarks and stuff you have to hit. Like your notes have to be in by a certain time so that they can make it into the book. And you have to communicate and you have to, otherwise all the instructors are making your life a living hell. I would, I would imagine.
it can be, yeah. And then the other side of the coin too is that, okay, you touched on something interesting. Yeah, yes, there's a deadline for notes. Well, a lot of teachers are running like by the seat of their pants, right? So it's like, oh God, I got to get my notes in. So they just turn anything in, and then their class ends up being completely separate. And you're thinking,
Right.
how do we rectify that? Well, the advisory board, the people that are on the board, are the same people that come to Float and take classes.
Right.
So those individuals are actually going to be reviewing each one of these instructors' classes as they happen.
Interesting.
So if it turns out that an instructor just submits random notes to fill space or to meet a deadline, and then their class is nothing like that, there is a bonus opportunity that the instructors are also eligible for. If the board's like, if the board's like, oh my God, this class was everything we wanted it to be and more, then the teacher will get that bonus.
Hmm.
If it's not, they won't. And then they'll receive an explanation as to why you're not getting the bonus.
Interesting.
Um, and so, it again, there has there has to be a level of accountability. If I'm going to tell people this convention is going to be X, Y, and Z, it has to be X, Y, and Z, or else I look like a complete douche, which is, which happens more often than not, but especially when you use the word douche in a podcast. Yeah, it's fine.
No, I love it. Well, I love float. It's definitely one of those that is always on my calendar, just like regardless. Like it's going to be something I go to. And it used to be in St. Louis. Now it's really close to me in Chicago. Um, what has that change been like? Because as a attendee, it's hard to change. It's like, oh, but I was comfortable in St. Louis and like they had the big lobby and the bar. And I would imagine that's hard too when you have to go through a change and have everyone's opinions involved. But I'm assuming you did it for very necessary reasons.
Well, yeah, we did. We outgrew St. Louis. I mean, the bottom
Hmm.
line was is that that venue, as much as we all loved that hotel, everyone loved that
I
hotel.
know. Why was it so good? It felt like a little magical safe space.
It really was. And the number one that you touched on it right away. It's not that there was a bar, but the hotel had a large central lounge type area that was extremely comfortable.
Yeah, and like accessible. Like if you didn't know anybody, you could go down there at any minute and find some new friends.
Right, exactly. And but the problem is our, we couldn't have any more than like 30 booths
Yeah.
because the biggest space was, with between classrooms and everything else, we just didn't have enough room. And now this year with 73 booths that sold out in like 2 weeks,
I know.
we are just like, I mean, we're already like, oh God, do we have to, do we have to move again? Now this hotel, as you touched upon, it doesn't have the central comfortable area. And the hotel bar is a private restaurant that apparently closes every night at 10.
Oh, okay.
So this year, one of the things that we're actively trying to do is to create a lounge space
Oh, nice.
in the hotel. We are looking to potentially rent furniture. We're looking to do all kinds of other stuff, which is why, you
It's super expensive.
the very first thing or one of the first things you touched on was, the day-to-day wage from float. No, because we try to keep the price so low because we want people to be able to get the best ROI as possible, right?
Yeah. It is low. Do you know what it is right now off the top of
Yeah,
your head? I know there's like a
it's 550. I mean, it's
yeah, I
550
mean,
until May 31st. It's 550, and again, when you look at everything you get with the convention, it's worth ridiculously more than that.
yeah.
But my intention is the more ROI you get, the more likely you are to come back.
Yeah.
Which means that, yeah, my profit margins are dramatically smaller.
Mhm.
I won't actually even know how much I make off the convention until probably February.
Hmm.
Um, and I know for a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, that's not the most responsible way to run." I get it, it's not, but at the
Right,
same
but you
time,
wanna provide a great experience. I mean, I think that there's something noble about that. It's not just about making you as much money as possible. It's about creating I mean, for me, it was life-changing. Like, I'm not just saying that. Like, it confirmed that I liked this thing that I thought I liked, and now I'm in over my head. I
oh,
can't stop now.
and for your listeners, I don't know that they know what a badass you are at float. Because no, and this is where I'm going to be completely. I mean, just fangirling here, or fanboying, or how does that work? How does that work when a guy's a fan of
I
a?
don't know, I guess fanboy.
I don't know. I guess I'd be a fanboy, yes, in that regard. So, was it 2019? It was 2019, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah entered the Designer of the Year competition in 2019.
Or was it 18? Because there was that one year where we had
That
2
was not,
floats
that,
in a row.
that was 19 and 20.
Okay,
So there was no float 18. That was the cruise year.
gotcha.
19 was the year then that you did it. And Sarah competed in, was it 4 design competitions?
I
It was
think?
3 or 4. It was 3 or 4. Um, I don't remember it, or was it all 5?
No, I didn't do large sculpture.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay, okay. So I think you entered 4. So the way Designer of the Year works at Float, there's 5 different competitions that someone can enter, and all of them are live competitions, which means you have a start time, you have an end time, and that's it. And I believe you entered 4 of those. And what happens is the top three scores of, if you enter you have to enter at least three competitions to be eligible for Designer of the Year. If you enter more than three, if you enter 4 or 5, then we take your top scores, and those are the ones that are applied into the Designer of the Year competition. Sarah took home the title of Designer of the Year because she had the highest scores of anybody else there. But what blew me away the most, and you tied a record for the most awards won in the designer awards competition. You took home 6 awards between like first place, second places, and third places of the different events you entered, and the delegates choice awards, right, which are the ones that the people vote on.
Gosh, you know so much more about this than I do. It was all a blur for me.
Yep, well, it was also your birthday, I remember that.
Oh my God.
Not gonna say why I remember that, but I remember
That's
that.
another story for
um
another day.
an entire story. But then um you also did it completely alone.
But I didn't do that to do it alone. I did it because I was so new. I didn't know how to work on a team.
But that's what people don't realize is that, okay, so Melissa Vinson, right? The historic Melissa Vinson is the person that owns that you share that title with at Float with the most awards won. Now, to be fair, Melissa did it when there were only 3 competitions at Float.
Yeah.
So she swept not only first place in all, and she swept first place in all 3 categories, which was entrance, designer, or entrance, centerpiece, and sculpture. And she won the delegate's choice in all 3. So she's the only person to have ever swept everything.
Well, even if it's a technicality, I'm very, very happy to share
Well,
some sort of company with her.
no, and you were the first person to come close, even. So the fact that you've tied it. But again, in the sculpture competition, in the entrance competition, Melissa had a team helping. You did your accomplishment, your designer of the year, and you did it working completely independently. And I told you that is one of the most badass things I'd ever seen,
Well,
because you achieved so much as a singular artist, and you
thank you.
absolutely deserve to be recognized and applauded for that.
Well, thank you. But you know what is so crazy about those competitions? That was, I mean, hardly any years ago. And if you look back at what I did that won or placed, now those wouldn't place in any categories. It's just crazy how fast things move forward. Like I think the quality increases so quickly from year to year that what I saw last time at Float, or the year that always stands out for me is when it was Edward and Dante
Mhm.
going head to head. Like that year was just incredible. I think that was the year before me. That was the year that I was kind of considering competing the following Float. And so going into my year, I was like, there's no way I have any chance because this talent is so crazy. Because you never know. You never know who's going to come out and compete. And sometimes it's these incredible twisters. Sometimes it's new people you've never heard of. Like I think the competitions are really special. For me, that's one of the defining moments of Float.
What's really funny too is we actually contemplated discontinuing them this year.
No.
We did. I understand. Of all people, I understand the need for them. I understand why they're so important. But from a managerial perspective, when you look at the amount of space that we have in that hotel and everything else,
Yeah.
like do we dedicate space to this, or do we dedicate space to something else? And now, of course, this time around, it might be very different because, like, for example, several of our competitions this year are being sponsored.
Mm,
And so now, like the sculpture competition, Gemar and Anagram are co-sponsoring that competition.
interesting.
So if you enter the sculpture competition and you need latex, well, let me rephrase that. If you enter the sculpture competition, Gemar will provide you up to $500 worth of product, and Anagram will provide you up to $150 worth of product for your specific entry. Now, you have to be able to justify your requests.
Yeah.
You can't just turn around and say, I need $499.95 worth of latex, and I need $149.99 worth of foils.
Sure.
You have to be able to justify through your design. I mean, they have the right to say, we need to see your designs, please.
Right. Or like give that back. You didn't open any of those bags.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's always been a big thing, because a lot of people want to enter, but they don't necessarily have, the kind of money to spend on practicing and then
Yeah.
competing and everything else. Um, And in the past, we've also made it a requirement that you must use the product for people that are there at the convention. So like if Qualitex, Batalic, and Anagram are the only manufacturers at the convention, then your entries have to use those products. So what's happening this year is if a competition is unsponsored, you can use any product you want.
So you could come in with like balloons from the dollar store.
Yes,
I mean,
or you
I
could come
wouldn't recommend doing that, but you can.
or you could buy your like Chinese product on Amazon, or you could come in with a brand that's not necessarily there. Like say, for
Interesting.
example, Convergram is not a sponsored float,
Hmm.
or Calisan or Decomex or something like that. You could come in. Now that could change. I mean, they could end up sponsoring later. I don't know. But the point is, right now they're not.
Yeah.
In the past, you wouldn't be allowed to use them. Now you can, because again, if the manufacturers aren't willing to stand up and say, yes, we're willing to make this commitment to this competition, then we're not expecting the designers anymore to have to either. But in the case of Gemar and Anagram with the sculpture competition, you must use Gemar and Anagram in your,
Yeah.
because they are
Which makes
provided.
sense.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So
I love the competitions because it's just for me, the challenge was entering and seeing an idea and a concept through to the end with a deadline. You know, like there's very few times we get to actually make things that we want to make.
right.
It's always for a client or, we have our hand involved, but I like kind of the restrictions. I like thinking about it. Like I remember it wasn't a year I was competing, but it was like the black and white. Everything had to be black or white balloons. And just seeing like what everyone came up with just using two colors was super cool. Like I love the competitions.
That was my favorite. That
You know what my favorite one was, and I remember it, and it's still a technique I want to do. They used a black balloon and then they painted with black paint. And then as the balloons oxidized, the gloss of the paint, like it looked like a flocked balloon. Like it looked like, and that was just one balloon on one piece. And I don't even know if they placed or whatever, but that's like a little thing I have in my back pocket that one day I'm gonna try. So that's the type of stuff that I pick up at Float. I love it.
Yeah, that was the reason why that was my favorite. It was an entrance decor competition, right?
Hmm.
What it was. And I loved it because it forced people to think about design rather
Hmm.
than color. Because a lot of our themes, a lot of the competitions have themes that are oriented towards what we could sell, right? Like last year was birthday.
Yeah.
And so it was, the entrance decor competition was based on a birthday theme. It couldn't be a specific gender. It had to be a neutral birthday theme, but the idea there, and that was kind of the tough restriction that we put on it. But my favorite was that black and white one because it forced people to really think outside the box and think they couldn't rely on what's automatically emotionally connected to a color.
Yeah.
Now had to really think hard about where each balloon was being placed. And
Yeah. I love it.
people were like, well, what about gray? Because it's like a combination of the two. I'm like, no, no, read. It's in black and white. It's black and it's white, and that's it. And people, and then it turned. Oh, people were. It was amazing how many times people tried to spin things.
No, I loved it.
No, black, white.
You know what I think would be so fun? And I don't know that there's room for it at Float, and I don't know who would ever do it. But I think a competition, have you ever watched like what's it even called? Like kitchen I don't know if it's kitchen, it's something. It's on the Food Network, but like the contestants can like sabotage the other contestants. They like win rewards and then it's like you can take one tool from your contestant. So then you have someone with like I'll take their hand pump or I'll take their inflator or sometimes you have to like duct tape things to your hands and you I don't know, maybe I'm too twisted. I think like
That
something like that would be so fun.
It's so funny you said that because I could see that being very popular at a twisting competition. Uh,
Oh, see, maybe that's what I'm doing wrong. I gotta find new people who like my psychotic competition ideas. Because it would just be fun, you know? It wouldn't be like,
well, we are okay. So one of the things that we're doing, we God, every year we've talked about doing it, we never did it, and this year we're doing it because there are so many people now that come in so early.
mm-hmm.
We're creating something called the Friday Night Fun, which is a formal function now on Friday night. It's part of the registration. They don't pay anything
Oh,
extra.
cool.
So if they come in, it's just like a function we're going to be doing. And one of the things that we have talked about doing forever is the dynamic duplicate contest, which is
Mm.
basically you and another person team up together to do goofy competitions at
Yes!
And so, and part of the problem is always run into the fact that when by the time we're in the 11th hour, it's too much. We got to. So this year we're actually assigning people to it, and that was
Yeah.
going to actually happen. And then of course last time with COVID and Omicron, we had to completely drop everything we were going to do special
Yeah.
because of the whole situation. Um, but yeah, I hope to God we never have to do this during another.
No. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it was literally every hour. Like what has gone sideways now?
Uh
It was, but it's. I mean, you normally expect that to some degree at a convention, but not on an hourly basis.
yeah.
You know,
No, it was crazy. And it was because yeah, it was like peaking again. It was like, oh, I thought we were kind of done with this and now it's back. It
yeah,
was horrible.
yeah, and then we had literally in 2 or 3 weeks we had what 120 some people switch to virtual because they didn't want to come now,
Oh man.
and people screaming and yelling that why haven't you canceled this? Why haven't you rescheduled it? I'm like, you guys don't understand the economics of this convention.
Yeah.
If
Right.
if you if you cancel it, I am financially responsible at that point for every penny the hotel was supposed to earn,
Right.
and I have to refund everybody's money on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not just canceling your reservation at a restaurant.
No, it's not. It's the way these contracts work. It's like, the hotel with X amount of rooms reserved and X amount of food committed to and everything else, they're expecting a paycheck of boom, right?
Yeah.
So that paycheck now has to be, and they did not, believe me when I tell you, they didn't care. Like,
Yeah, I mean, they had been screwed
right.
in the early ages of COVID. I think they learned their lesson that they had to have things locked down, like we all did. All of our cancellation policies, I think, got a lot stricter.
Well, and it was very funny because, like, whenever they couldn't follow up with something, right? Like, because there were times when we had to set our own tables and chairs in the classrooms and things because they didn't have a CS team,
Hmm.
because their CS team is normally 12 people and they had three. And so as a result, we're moving tables, we're moving chairs, we're doing this. And we tell you something to the hotel, and well, it's COVID. What do you expect? It's COVID.
Right, but you didn't have that same leeway.
We did not get that leeway back at all. They were like, nope, contract, contract, contract. And I'm
Huh.
like, but wait a minute. COVID, COVID, COVID. Nope.
Well, hopefully that's all behind us
I
and COVID. Oh, I was going to say COVID's less than a year away. No way.
hope.
Float is less than a year away. I'm so excited. It's on my calendar. I'm teaching. I'm very excited to be back.
And we're excited
Um,
to have
Yeah. What are there any new faces that you are particularly excited about seeing on the teaching roster?
you. I am, yeah. Well, there's there's so much new blood at the convention. You've got, there's so, like, for example, again, a lot of the success stories that have come out of COVID, like a lot of the newer faces, right? Um, new perspectives, new everything else. I'm really excited to see what the folks at DeLunes bring from the New Jersey area.
Mm,
Um, and again, you cannot, Confetti Castle and Charming Garlands with Allison and Tiffany are always
yep.
exciting to watch. Um,
Dave Mahoney.
I'm very well. Dave was actually supposed to teach in 2022. Uh,
Okay.
Dave respectfully did not want to follow our COVID policies.
Okay.
And so, he's like, no, Steve, it's not you. I know you're doing it because you have to do it, but I'm not going to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But so we're excited that Dave's coming back. Um, Another individual that I'm very excited about is Flavia.
Yeah.
Flavia is a fairly new balloon person who started, she's been to a couple floats, but she started, a year or two before the pandemic. And Flavia has just made tremendous achievements in her business and her growth and her everything. And
She's
so,
going to be on an interview on the podcast in a couple
oh,
weeks. We are setting one up. She just saved me a buttload of money by sharing a contact that she had with someone in China to get me those giant silver balloons,
mhm,
so
yeah,
the connections too that you make it float are super important. The
oh,
fact that I can text people and be like, "Hey, where are you guys getting these balloons?" And 2 minutes later you can have the direct contact of someone like that. That pays back in dividends as well.
yeah. Um, as far, but we have some fabulous talent coming. There's still the first full week of June. We'll be announcing four more of our general instructors.
Oh, more are coming?
Yeah.
Oh,
We've got four
good.
more announcements. We have four more general instructors to announce. And then this fall, we're announcing all the masterclass instructors. So
Cool.
yeah. So I know three or four of them. So we're still looking for a couple more. So yeah.
Well, awesome. Let's wrap this up. Anyone who's listening who doesn't have their float ticket yet, I don't say this lightly, but if you're not there, you're missing out. There are other things that I'm like, you could go or not go. A float is one of those that it's not every year. So I think you want to make time for it when it is, and it's in Chicago. So it's an international airport. You can get to it fairly easily. Um, I don't know why I feel so passionate about sharing this detail, but it is walking distance to a Target,
There's
which
a
I
lot
think
of people very passionate about that topic.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like if you don't travel frequently or you're worried about forgetting something or like you're not stuck in the middle of nowhere, so it's a very safe, easy place to get to. I mean, I love float. I grow so much. I make so many friends. So it's such an affordable price. We will definitely link it in the show notes so people can grab their ticket. Are you at risk of selling out?
So that's a great question. Probably not.
Okay.
I won't say no because that's always. I mean, you just in this day and age, you just never know what the hell's going to happen.
Everyone and their mom is a balloon artist today.
Yes, they are. But it we have done an assessment, and it looks like we can handle up to 1,000 people.
Okay.
Now that includes everybody. That's staff,
Okay.
that's teachers, that's sponsors, the whole bit. Right now, we're about 430, 440.
Okay.
So
Well, you might get there in a year.
it is very possible that it could happen. Um, you
Because you sold out every year in St. Louis, right? Like I
know,
remember it selling out early because my first year I was on the wait list and I only came because someone canceled.
right. Yeah. Well, St. Louis was it's a much smaller place.
Yeah.
This particular venue is considerably larger. But like I said, if we the problem we're running into now is if we go bigger than this, now we're looking at hotel rooms over 200 a night. We're looking
Yeah.
a bunch of others and massive minimums. Um, for example, this hotel requires that we spend at least 30 grand on food.
Blah.
Now, keep in mind that does not include the 33% tax and service charge.
Oh.
So it's actually 40.
Well, I remember I had my booth and I was like, "Oh, I want to do a champagne wall." And you were like, "You have to cater the champagne through the hotel and it's like $10 a glass." And I was like, "I don't need a champagne wall."
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's because I really wanted to do, I really would love to do a champagne toast at Float
Yeah.
here for the 10th convention because it's not our 10th anniversary, it's our 10th convention.
Mm.
And, yeah, you just said it right there. It's like,
Just tell everyone to go to the bar, get their own glass of champagne, and meet in the lobby.
I mean, it's a big chunk of change to do that.
Yeah,
And, but in final night dinner, I mean, the final night dinner, by the time it all boils down is about 75, $80 a person.
yeah,
And so these new venues, because we've been exploring for 2026, right? These new venues want like 150 grand minimum. And they want, and again, you're looking at over 200 and something dollars a night for every hotel room.
yeah,
And I keep trying to explain to them, it's like you don't understand our industry. We're not using other people's corporate cards. We're not using other people's money to attend these events, right?
right,
And so we really have to think long and hard about where's that balance point. And so it may mean that, we may end up not being able to go to a bigger place because we want to keep that price where people can afford to go.
right. No, and I appreciate that so much. I'm sure a lot of people do. Everyone I know has their ticket already. I am sharing the good news afloat from the rooftops. I can't wait. It is one of my favorites ever. Always make time for it. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I feel like we could talk for another 2 hours, but I have to go get my daughter from daycare.
Lord knows I've been accused of that. So yeah.
So where is the best place for people to go to find out about Float? Is it the website or do you want them to head to a Facebook group?
Okay, so obviously the website is floatconvention.com and that has a good general chunk of information, but the central hub of communication for like everyday type stuff is the Float Facebook group, which is Float the Convention. That's the name of the group at Facebook. We also conduct live Q&As every Sunday night in that Facebook group on a show called Step Chat, which is every Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And then we just recently started doing Instagram lives, which are called In the Van on Instagram with Esteban. Now that's not got a committed date to it every week.
Sure.
It's going to float, no pun intended. It's going to change about based upon my work schedule because again, like everybody, I'm in the trenches blowing up balloons too.
Yeah.
So it's like, if it works out, okay, it'll be tonight. Hey, guess what? You got 6 hours. We'll do it tonight or whatever. So
Yeah. I think if you're one of those people who likes to be in the know, you like to know like what's happening. And because I find that fun to know like, oh, you have a special performer coming this year and little details you don't need to know. Like you're not going to be unprepared if you get there and you don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun to get psyched about some of the special things.
Yeah, and I think we have a lot to offer. So I'm looking forward to, and we're always trying to make improvements. We're always trying to make changes to find everybody's enjoyment.
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for everything you've done for me. Personally, I swear, like I'm not just saying that float changed my life. It was the most memorable year. That competition year was so fun, and it has just been a fun ride since then.
All I did was provide you a door. You walked through that door and you took the door with you. So nice job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, thanks so much, and we will see you at Float. That does it for this week's episode. If you are wondering how in the world you could go to a balloon convention and leave your business for a week, my answer is 17 hats. I have my little army of robots working for me while I'm away because I have implemented 17 hats as my CRM in my balloon business. This means that emails are replied to, quotes are sent, invoices are paid, even when I am enjoying myself at a balloon convention or on a family vacation. So if you feel like the chaos of running your business is starting to ruin your life, check out 17hats.com and use the link in the show notes for a special promotional code where you receive 50% off your first year. It's so affordable, you can pay off this entire platform in one sale. Yeah, I'm serious. It's like $600 a year, full price, $300 with the coupon code. That's not even the price of a balloon arch. So if you are dragging your feet, it's time to level up with 17 hats. Thanks for listening. As usual, I tried to keep it bright and light. If you are interested in bonus episodes, check out our Patreon group where I release an additional episode every single week and you unlock more than 50 archived episodes as soon as you join. Check out the link in the show notes wherever you're listening.